For those of you who don't know me, my name is Holly Johnson, and I just recently graduated from Raytown High School. I've been in this youth group for 4 years, and I couldn't be any more blessed. I've met some of my best friends here, and I've got to do a lot of work alongside them. This past mission trip, we went to Louisville, Kentucky. And out in the community of Louisville, we got to experience a lot of different things. We worked at a soup kitchen called the Lord's Kitchen. Some of us were in the back sorting out cans, and others were painting the bathrooms, and then another set of us were out front serving food. And it was kind of a culture shock because as Garrett was talking about Nico, he was talking about how their neighborhood had a very high crime rate, and it was really impoverished. So that was very different to see, considering how most of us live in Lee Summit, Blue Springs, Independence, or Raytown. And then we also worked at Miss Mary's home, and she had been all over the world because her husband was in the military. She said that she had been in Germany, Italy, and England at different military bases. At one of our evening worship services, the pastor, Scott Hill, gave a sermon over Lazarus. And after listening to his sermon and experiencing those things in the community, rereading this sermon and thinking a lot about it, this is what I was thinking about. Well, when I was reading it, it said by the time that Jesus had arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. Yet he told Martha to roll away the stone. John 11:40, he had said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And knowing that Lazarus had been dead and wrapped for 4 days, that's when he called out in his loud voice and said, "Lazarus, come out." And after thinking about it and listening to his sermon, it said Jesus specifically had said Lazarus, like he called him by his name. He could have just as easily said, "Come out," and Lazarus probably still would have came. But he says Lazarus, kind of like how he calls each and every one of us to come out of the dark and into his light. And in the story, out comes Lazarus wrapped in his grave clothes back into the light, alive. And after thinking about it, I was sitting here trying to imagine seeing a man who'd been dead for 4 days come stumbling out of a grave, resurrected by Jesus. And Jesus does that for all of us. He calls us by our names to come to him. He knew that Lazarus' story did not end in death, and neither does ours. Because Jesus overcame death, and so do we. We see a lot in the Bible about overcoming death. John 11:25-26, he says, Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the light. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? John 14:1-2, he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are so many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I went to prepare a place for you?" And lastly, John 16:33, he says, "I have said this to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you face persecution, but take courage, I have conquered the world." And so many other scriptures tell us that when we step out of the grave and into his light, we will overcome.